Greetings. I don't know how many times I've said this, but I really do want to make this rather short because it shouldn't be a long topic. But this is the teaching that, and I've looked into the words and some of the better translations out there, such as, my belief, they do a better, more consistent job translating the Hebrew and Greek more consistently. Not that there is any perfect translation, but the three I like to look at when there's some issue or something is Young's, Rotherham, Concordant, and there's others too. Uh, Not too many people seem to know of the Rotherham and Concordant, but some of these translations I wish they just cleaned up or did a revision on just the words, just the name, a few names, God, Lord, Jesus, the concordant, for example, does translate in the Old Testament Elohim, and it renders Yahweh for Lord. So that's nice they did that, but they didn't do anything in the New Testament for some reason. They still use Lord, God, Jesus. But anyways, that's not the point of this video. I'm making a big deal about it, but looking into some of the, people call it the sacred name movement. They always have to call something and box it up, and there are problems, as with anything, with any so-called group or whatever, which I'm not in any group. I'm not going to be boxed up in some name like sacred name movement or this or that, It's just true believers or false believers, That's it. But that's how the devil grabs something, boxes it up, and says it's all false, and everyone doing this is heretic, So there seems to be quite a few, actually, if you do the search online, on YouTube, on people calling on the people that want to know to the best of their ability the true name. They call it junk. They call this sacred name, of which I'm not a part of some movement, but they call the people that were inspired by the Spirit to, He puts the thoughts in you, and then you have questions. That's how it's been for 7 years for me. I have the questions, and then I start looking into to see if whatever the world says is true or false, what the truth is. Ask for the truth directly, always. And there's quite a few people out there that's calling it all junk and deception. It's mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing that they would rather stick to Jesus, Lord, and God, and say that the people that want to use true names to the best of their whatever we've been given, it's far better than Lord and God and these fake names that no one called them. No disciples called the Messiah Jesus or Isus or Zeus or whatever back then, not one. But they would rather use and continue and say that the people that want to know, and get closer to the truth on that it's junk. They're actually calling it junk and deception and heresy. So I don't know. Is that blaspheming the Spirit? If it's not, it's pretty darn close to call all the people, box them all up, and call it junk and deception and even foul spirits, people who are teaching this. It's pretty serious. Pretty serious to me, serious enough to where I don't see someone doing that the rest of their life as inheriting the kingdom by calling the true name junk. No, I don't see that. I don't see that. You can't hate that truth or hate wanting to know the name. You can't hate that. If you do, you got devils in you, man. Not the other way around. Uh, Calling it junk and foul spirits and all kinds of, heresy and deception. Now, are there problems with any group of people and believers? Yeah, there is, because some go so extreme to say if you pronounce it slightly different than I'm giving you, there won't be any salvation for them. And they call on the name of, name of the Lord. You don't pronounce it just like my website says, that you're done. You're going into judgment. I don't know where they get this from. That's assuming, first of all, that they got it perfect. They figured it out and they got it perfect. Now, I've seen not just one website or people say this. I've seen multiple, and multiple different pronunciations. So which one's true? You got all kinds of confusion going on. I've found some saying if you don't say Yahweh, you're done. You're hosed. You got to pronounce it. It's only his name, And then others, Yahuwah or Yehovah or whatever, the pronunciation is. They say that's the truth, and if they don't call on this exactly like this, it's crazy. It's insane. So there are issues with some of the people that have come, they become stuck up and prideful. That's what happened. That's what happened. They think they have a truth no one else can ever receive. And there's different things being said, different names. And each group or website or whatever is saying you got to pronounce it like this, and another one's saying you got to pronounce it like this, or else, that's total nonsense. 2,000 years of confusion and delusion and hiding the names and everything. Everyone's, the ones that do want to know the name, they're just doing the best that they've been given. That's all. Someone that starts claiming if you don't pronounce it just like this, that's pretty insane. There wouldn't be many that say Adoni, Adoni, Lord, Lord. They came in his name, and we've done many wonders and miracles, right? There wouldn't be many the last 2,000 years, for example, because the vast majority of the people, anyone who calls themselves a believer, used Jesus or Jesus or whatever name before the 1300s, was used. It wasn't the true name. So the vast majority of the people have been using some kind of transliteration of the name from the Hebrew to Greek, from Latin, and then finally English. They act as if they don't even realize that he still hears people who called on Jesus' name, Christ. If their doctrine was true, that you can't even pronounce it slightly wrong, you better pronounce it whatever we say, or else he doesn't hear you. Where did they, what happened to them? Did they start off calling on supposedly whatever they claim is 100% accurate, true name? Who started off doing that? It's pretty obviously, so there's still some kind of power, even in the transliteration, Jesus. If that was true, what they were teaching, then nobody would be a believer. None. Zero. Can you see that? The contradictions? If what they taught, that the pronunciation has to be exactly like, then if that was the truth, then nobody would be a believer. No one. Because he wouldn't hear Jesus, Lord and God. None. He wouldn't hear anyone. Pretty dumb. Pretty stupid. Now, when someone comes to the knowledge that it's definitely not Jesus, why not try to use the true name, whatever he's given you, But which is at the very least, far closer than Jesus. But my point is he's heard people say it, Jesus, a name that's not even close to the Hebrew, right? There wouldn't be many. There wouldn't be many if he didn't hear or have some kind of power through that name. And I'm not promoting it. That's not the point. The point is that, my goodness, that's not who the Father is. He knows we're all deceived. We all start out deceived. And pronouncing it slightly wrong, whatever, let's say there is a grand truth, there is, but someone's pronouncing the Hebrew name slightly different, wrong. He won't hear that, but he heard Jesus for 2,000 years, because there have been true believers the last 2,000 years that at least started out using that name. That's just the point. That's the only point I'm trying to bring. I'm not trying to say go back to something is not close to the truth, at least, but we know that's who it's talking about. Jesus is referring to the Messiah of the Scriptures, not somebody else. But there is a such thing as another Messiah too, and it's a spiritual problem. Test the spirits, because people get deceived along some point, and the thing that sprouted dies. But they might have started off with some kind of true belief, people don't believe this happens ever. And just once saved, always saved kind of deal. The whole mindset concerning his truth, his commandments, is wrong. They make it black or white. It's either law, all the law exists and you gotta complete it and do it all, or not. Black and white. I don't see that. I don't see it like that. Not anymore. That's not the truth. That's not the heart of a believer. It's not black and white like that. It's instructions on how to live. And you'll want to do these things, and you don't have to do all these things perfectly right from the beginning. That's what the Pharisees were doing. This is something that's very hard, apparently, to get through most Christians' minds. And that's what what I see him doing the whole time, is trying to find that balance by not trashing the law, the Torah instructions. I don't even know if you can call it law, because even that's been perverted. They're instructions. That's what Torah means. And it's the way. It's life. That's the true way, of which Messiah did. He followed that, in the Spirit, and completed these things, did this, understanding in the Spirit what these things mean, and not the letter, not your own works, not cold, hard, dead rules, regulations. Oh, I have to do this. As soon as someone has that mindset, you would be falling from grace, I guess. That's what he was teaching. As soon as you become prideful and self-righteous and start imposing all these things on people, and or else kind of attitude, it's false. It's false. You gotta get to the point in your life where you just want to do the Father's will. That's all. That's all it is. You just want to do what's right. Here's the instruction. Here's the guide. Here's the guide. It's not, nobody was under the law. Nobody was under the law. They act like this is a brand new teaching. Now, most of the way most people think and believe they're under the law, most of the Israelites, the way they believed and thought they were under the law, okay? Not the true saints, not the true believers. They were never under the law. They were under the grace, favor, what? He changed the way he works radically. First it was works of the law, and you become righteous by law working. It was never like that. Those examples over and over again are people who had faith, and then he gives you the Spirit to want to do these things, and they do it out of the right reason. not because of their prideful, self-righteous law-keeping, going around slamming everyone who doesn't do it exactly like you and perfectly and whatever. There's some gray areas too in life. It's not like the Torah covers every little fine detail, gray area and aspect of life. And Paul knew that. That's what he was saying. Not to divide over stupid things like food. And this has nothing to do with the Torah. That's already a given, what's unclean, and Paul knew that. He wasn't talking about that. He's talking about, in the example there, vegetarians, they weren't eating any meat, and they were saying all those who eat meat, period, were false, and there was caused division. And he says all things are clean. He's not talking about clean and unclean foods. He was talking about the specific problem that they created, vegetarians versus meat eaters, and things sacrificed to idols that ended up in the marketplace. He was correcting that, basically leaving them alone. If you want to be a vegetarian, be a vegetarian. Don't cause division or hurt anyone through this. If you want to eat meat, then do that. And he didn't try to stop them from what they were doing. If that's what someone wants to do, then fine. It's not wrong, it's not right. It's neither. This would just be one little example of like a gray area. There is no rule. There is no commandment for that, not to eat meat or to eat meat. Once you see the context on some of these things, it's pretty glaringly obvious how wrong the church world teaches things. But then to go on the extreme and become like a Pharisee is also wrong. Pound in the law, works of the law, working by your own power without any kind of true faith, then you end up being cursed under the law because you can never attain righteousness through it from doing that. Nobody did. It doesn't change. There wasn't like, a certain point in time, now it changed. Now the law makes no one righteous. Before this time, it made people righteous. It's a fine line. That's why it's hard for people to understand and even explain. It's a fine line, living the truth. You could go off to the left or to the right pretty easily. You could go off into grace's license to sin, or you become prideful, self-righteous, and you're law keeper, and everyone that does something a little differently or not keeping whatever, you instantly condemn them. You could go off either way. What seems like pretty easily, and a lot of people do. So there's always going to be negatives and problems, even with people who want to do what's right and keep his commandments. They're going to start being prideful and self-righteous and start telling you you're not saved and all this other junk. When Paul made it pretty clear, it's by faith. It's always been by faith. They were looking forward to Messiah. We look back. It's no different. It's always been by faith. Noah had faith. He did something that he couldn't prove, didn't know what would happen for sure, He didn't know. He just had to take it on faith. He did that. And people who have his spirit and want to do what's right because of the right reasons, they have the true faith. That's the true way to be blessed, to have life within you, and teach others the same. You don't become some kind of robotic, dead, hard, cold lawgiver of things, So it seems like a really fine line that so many people can't ever come to an understanding. As soon as you try to tell them some of these things, now you got to do everything. Now you got to keep every little bit. They don't understand the context of most of Paul's writings. They don't want to seek truth and try to find it and see what was actually going on. He was talking about people who relied on the law to be righteous. So then those who did that, now you're a debtor to keep the whole law. The point was he wasn't doing away with it. He was doing away with the false understanding of it, of, it's a false belief and mindset and heart. It's total corruption. That's what he was going against with the Jews. Their hearts were far. Connect the scriptures. Their hearts were far from him. That's what we read. So what were they doing wrong? They became prideful, self-righteous, robotic, systematic, keep the laws, all this stuff, but their heart, there was no spiritual conversion of the heart. And when it's done like this, then the Torah is garbage for that person. It's worthless. It's worthless. But those who come in through the true faith and want to do what's right and live it in the Spirit, then it's very valuable. But if you try to get everyone to keep everything all right away, and force this on people, that's never what it's been about. It's never been like that. From the beginning of creation to the end, it's never been about that. As if the Father's up there with some kind of robotic, cold, hard, dead, no heart, systematic. Here's these rules and you got to do, and these things are all just look like a heavy burden and so many rules. It's not what it's about. If you live in the Spirit, these things just flow. They just happen. You complete so many of these things just by walking in the Spirit and through faith. He teaches you, shows you, here's the guide, just in case, look, learn it, but don't become like a Hitler or something with this. It's never the intention of it. So then there's always problems at every side, at every corner, with people everywhere, no matter what. It's just going to continue to happen until the end. It's just the way it is. The devil's working hard, overtime now. And, the devil doesn't like more scriptures coming out, more Bibles you could buy that are, less pagan. The devil likes pagan and calling on these things, because it is a problem, but it's not the problem that people make it like, oh, he doesn't hear you. If that was true, I wouldn't even be here today, because I didn't know his name or even remotely for quite a long time. And that's living in the Spirit. You're just doing what he says and learning as you go. That's it. You have the true faith. It wasn't perfect, still not perfect, during that whole time period of using false names and stuff, but it wasn't as if he was rejecting me or anyone else, that has their heart set right, that has the heart, it is about the heart. That's like the main thing. It is the most important thing. Because otherwise you just become a robot, a Hitler with the Torah, and your heart has nothing to do with the Father. Its intentions are corrupt. If you can understand that, you can understand what the true purpose is and how it's always been, And one thing that I do believe, the way they teach it is there was a radical change. That means the Father changed with how he works with people. There is no such thing. That cannot be true. Those lambs and all those sacrifices were, until the Messiah came, were doing that. It satisfied the purpose for the Father, and he created that system of sacrifice. It satisfied the thing for until the Messiah came, but the ones that had true faith, it wasn't some radically they had the faith, and their sins were forgiven. Now, granted, it doesn't teach it like the way so clear in the New Testament in many places, but it's in there. David was one of them that's very clear. Blessed is he whose sins are forgiven, transgression, are removed. Restore the joy of salvation. I mean, come on. But how do I explain this? Because we're not, his people are not going around killing enemies, and they did that. Now, granted, I believe every time that happened, that was, that was the Father using his nation, his Jerusalem, to go and judge others. So it wasn't their call, it wasn't their judgment. But this, it's nothing changed except that these natural became spiritual. First the natural, then the spiritual, Paul says. So, and I'll prove it's not going to change. We're still going to do that. People who inherit the kingdom, whoever inherits the kingdom will judge other nations, kind of like they did, but it's not going to be like physical, killing people and stuff. The wages of sin is death, but it's spiritual. It's spiritual. So there was a change, if you will, from not how he works, but natural to spiritual. His righteousness was revealed more so than any time before, the teaching of who he is, his righteousness is being revealed. But it was always his righteousness for those who had faith, not their own. It was like that for Abraham, for Noah, for Jacob. It wasn't their righteousness. They couldn't remove their sins, neither could animals ultimately. And they couldn't be counted righteous and blessed, saved. Not saved as in past tense, it's over. That's not how I use the word. Because it's ongoing. It's being saved continually. It was always like this. The faith led to removal of sins, and then when they sinned, they had to do the animal sacrifices and all this. So, and that happened a lot. A lot of sacrifices, That's one reason why the covenant's better, is because the Messiah is doing all this, atoning for sin. So, you could see how it changed from natural to spiritual, but it still exists. So then, Israel judging the nations when the Father says to, when he says, their iniquities filled up, I'm going to go judge them and I'll use you. He could do that. It's not a contradiction that they went and killed people, but we don't do that anymore. That was a physical example of something spiritual. It was righteous judgment still. Wages of sin is death. Those nations were filled up with sin, perversion, sexual perversion. The love grew cold, like the end of every nation. It always is the same. And he judged them using his people many times. Now it's spiritual. He will use his Israel, New Jerusalem, to judge the world, the whole world. Paul says, don't you know? He got it from the scriptures because the Father gave him understanding. Don't you know you're going to judge people? And if you can't even rightly judge these little matters, how much things pertaining to life. So yeah, the people who say, don't judge me, if you do it with the right spirit, the right purpose for correction, then yeah, that's what his people do. And they're going to be judging people. The people that still say, don't judge me, they're unbelievers, most likely. Unless they actually rightly say that someone's condemning you for something that they shouldn't be doing, but you know what I mean. So it's spiritual. It's still going to happen. He's going to use, he's not going to go around in the resurrection killing a bunch of people and torturing them. Okay, that was a physical type. We don't battle physical, do we? But they more so battled physical. And David, I got enemies everywhere, all around me. He's like literally talking about people, enemies everywhere. But we understand this is spiritual. And it's the spiritual person. It's the spiritual problem within the person that's our enemies. The battle of our own selves But spiritual things, our mind, our heart, that's the battle. It's not with like swords and stuff. And that would have been true back then, but it wasn't, they, most of the people didn't have the Spirit, they didn't have it. And they didn't have His Spirit, the Israelites. The vast majority of them wouldn't have had it. So then without the Spirit, it's just not that hard to understand. You just become you trying to be religious with can't hear Him, no power from Him. It's just you trying your best to keep a bunch of laws, and then it's your righteousness. And that's no good. That's no good. So it's always been by faith, but what was being revealed is His righteousness, in a powerful way to make it more clear. It's not that He radically changed something, but to sort of expose Israel, the whole entire history, most of them, as just self-righteous, just without the Spirit, trying to do their own works and works of the law. And then you're under it, and then you're condemned, because you got to keep it perfectly to be considered righteous. As soon as you break something, you're unrighteous forever. You can't undo that. So they had sacrifices to temporarily wipe out the sins, but they never could attain righteousness by trying to keep the law, because they would break something over and over again. You just can't be perfect. So the whole point of natural Israel was to expose humanity as a whole, that you can't do anything without the Father working in you. No one can. The Gentiles, they were all pagan. They didn't do anything right. And the Israelites, most of them didn't do right. And they were constantly cursed for breaking these things. So I think some of these physical, you're not under this curse when you believe. There was some kind of change. It's a better covenant. It's not that there's no judgment. There's like a spiritual judgment when you're a sinner. It didn't go away. It's just that physical curse, you're not under it if you believe. You're not stoned to death instantly and your life is taken. You're not under the curse of that death. The law of sin. The law of sin is being under the law without the Spirit working in you, and you just trying to be self-righteous and be the best you can, and you become prideful doing that. Then you're under the curse, because you don't actually truly believe. And that's why religion is dangerous, because that's where most Christianity's hearts are. It's a deception that, people who want to keep His way, they're the ones that are prideful and self-righteous. The Torah was nailed to the cross. No. It's the same thing as the Pharisees. They're just more deceptive. It's worse. They're the ones that think they're working their own. They don't rely on Him for anything, the false believers, whoever they are, which I say is most religions. They're not relying on Him. They pray robotic prayers. They can't hear Him. They don't care. They literally think I'm good because look how good I am. It's a false pride, false humility, not false pride, false humility and pride. And everything they do is the wrong mindset, the wrong belief for the wrong reasons. Okay, that's what the Israelites did for 1,500 years, most of them. Just try to get that through to your head, your heart. That's what it is. So you could do wrong by trying to keep the law, the Torah. You could be very wrong and no good. But you can also go to the other extreme and say it's done away with and I don't want to have anything to do with righteous anything. That's wrong. That's very wrong too. So what's the balance then? Well, it is by faith, faith. That's got to be given to you. It's a gift. And if you have that true faith, then you want to, out of your heart, and you pray about things like pride and self-righteousness, and you truly start changing, and you're not that you're literally perfect every day, but you're not that prideful beast that you used to be. That religion keeps you in. That religion keeps you in. It's contradicting. you know, what they say. They sound good by doing away with the Torah, which the Ten Commandments are. And it sounds like we're the ones that are not prideful because we're not trying to keep no laws. That's for prideful people. Can you see how deceptive that is? They're the ones, man. I mean, the Spirit has shown me over and over. I could walk up to some of these religious people and I know right away. Spirit tells me, oh, the person's prideful. Sorry, you know, that's not my work. That's not my work. I'm not judgmental or condemning them now. I just could see it. I just see it. Spiritual man judges all things, but he himself is rightly judged by no one. Specifically, no one there is, you know, unbelievers. The body should judge itself and correct itself. They should be able to see these things, but unbelievers, fake believers, they can't ever rightly judge you. They think you're prideful at all times, and you know they're prideful. You know they are, but they think you are. That's what religion causes and does. They literally have esteem for themselves. Everything they do, the preacher man, you know, is for self-glory, esteem. And that's exactly what Messiah said. There's only two people. Those who want to do the Father's will, truth will be revealed to them. And those that don't, you know, the ones that don't, what does he say? They seek their own glory. That's what their purpose is. And that's wrong. That's prideful. They're not under grace. They're not under favor. Those who seek their own glory, pride, you know. They don't understand what it is, what the purpose is. They teach the opposite of what they actually are. They sound like they're teaching the truth, but they're actually the exact opposite. Much of these people. I'm not going to say everyone in every one of these buildings are automatically false, that they're not. You know, there could be a few of them in there, but they need to come out, though. If they are true believers, they will come out. They're not going to be with the body of liars and prideful people and paganism if they care about the truth, you know. They're going to have to come out. It has to happen. Abraham got called out. He was a Gentile, you know, and he made him the father of, you know, all the Israelites that ever would be, you know, the Hebrews. But Abraham was just a Gentile that got called out. And, you know, he wasn't even circumcised. That happened years later. So nothing, you know, as far as that goes, it hasn't changed. But these things are spiritual, though. These things are spiritual. We see that more so than anybody back then did. That's my belief. That's my understanding, you know. It's not that David was unrighteous according to the way it was, physical. You know, it's just that we're more spiritual than King David was. Have to be. Because it's not even in your heart to go and kill anyone. You know, I'm not saying that was wrong for the time. That's just how it was. It was natural. It was sort of the natural representation of faith. It still was by faith for the believers. It's just that since the time of Messiah, you know, we're more spiritual. More spiritual, I believe, you know. We have the Spirit in more power, fullness available. It doesn't just come upon a prophet. He's in us. You know, he's working in us. It doesn't just come upon a prophet for a few days or whatever, you know. And so he can speak true words and know truth and do what's right. It's comes with power. Now what? I failed again at making a short video. I don't even remember the title. Wow, probably should remake this video. Or I'll just put in the description where I finally get to the point, I guess, so you could forward it if you want to skip it to get to the point. They didn't pierce. It says they pierced me. I think it's in Ezekiel or Zechariah. Yeah, Zechariah. And people literally teach that the Father was pierced, like as if he could die or something. But how could he say that and not actually literally be him? This is not hard to understand, you know. They teach because of a few Trinitarian verses that people say they are Trinitarian. They just impose it, they just make it up. And that the Messiah is the Father. He is Elohim, God, you know. He's always existed. He is the Father. You know, they're not separate beings. They're one. Well, come on, Ryan, don't you know? I and the Father are one. Yes, so are the disciples. So are true believers. Therefore, I'm the Father. Look at me. I'm Elohim. I'm the creator of the heavens and earth. I'm the Father. That's blasphemy. Anybody who says that, that's blasphemy. Go into Daniel and read that. The false Messiah that's coming. He's above all other so-called Elohims, mighty ones. He calls himself an Elohim, a God, a mighty one. And it's blasphemy. You think the Messiah did that? No, he didn't. It's blasphemy. Not too many people bring this point up. People that know that the Messiah is not the Father, the Creator. Some of them don't bring this point up ever. It's blasphemy. It didn't change. It's blasphemy for anyone, any man to say that. I am the Creator. I am the God. You know? And Messiah is not going to claim that. He never did. He's the Messiah. He's the King of Kings. The Father made him so. Made him to be. But he's not coming back saying, I'm the Creator. It's not going to happen. So then how do you understand they pierced me? With the Father speaking there. Some say even that's the Messiah speaking there. They pierce me because that's the Messiah is the Father. So they just twist everything. No, that's our Creator. That name is not Messiah's name. The Tetragrammat, whatever the 4 letters, you know, however, you know, the people that say if you pronounce it slightly different than they do, they're not true believers, you know. Yahuwah. Some say Yahweh. Some say something else. Yehovah. Okay, but that's the Father's name. That's not the Messiah. He has a different name. In his name, he came in his name, but it's not the same exact name. So no, that's not the Messiah speaking, because the Messiah is never called Yahuwah, or, you know, those who say something else, slightly different pronunciations. He's never called the Father's name. He has his own name. Father gave him a name above all names. And the way to understand this is very simple. The Father saying, and they pierced me. The Messiah wasn't even born yet. But he's saying this is what's going to happen. They're going to pierce me. Where do you think Messiah got the understanding from? Through the Spirit, through understanding the Scriptures, is how I like to say it, because his believers, he always has them, you know, through the Spirit, he teaches you his word, the Scriptures. So the Messiah was reading as he was growing up. He read it all. He read it all. And the Spirit taught him. The Father taught him. So then he also needs to teach all his other sons. If you pierce me, if you pierce him, you pierce me. That's how he says they pierced me. The Father says they pierced me. It's not confusing. It's not hard to understand. But when you're Trinitarian, they butcher everything and contradict everything. And come up with pagan, false deities and incarnations. And Messiah is the Father. Nonsense. Now you'll remember these words when Yeshua said, if you've done it to the least of these little ones, you've done it to me. And Paul understood that. And if you've done it to the great ones, the little ones, everyone in between, if you do this to my people, you do it to me. If you neglect someone, you neglect me. How's that work? Why is that true? Why does it work like that? Because we're supposed to be one in the spirit. You do that to one of my people, you do it to me. So then the Father, being the first example, says, they pierced me. It says in the scriptures, it says, pierce me. Yeah, because if you pierce him, my son, spiritual, okay, it's not physical anything. This is my beloved son, who represents me, my image, my spiritual image, right? If you do these things to him, you've done it to the Father. That's all. Now, if I were to go and do something evil to someone, a believer, then I've done it to the Messiah and ultimately to the Father too, because it's all one spirit, It's not anything to do with three beings forming into one thing. It's nothing like that. It's dumb. Evil teaching, contradicting, takes away all the truth. If you've done it to the least of these little ones, you've done it to me. Literally, physically? No, it's a spiritual problem, isn't it? You're not thinking primarily carnal, physical and stuff, but the saying is true. And he abided in the Father. So we abide in him, and he abides in us, like he abided in the Father, and the Father was in him. Same. Now, the Jews, the unbelievers that wanted him killed and had him killed, they did that to the Father, see? Literally, though, the Father literally died. Is the Messiah literally being pierced or dying or something right now when someone does this to another believer? Some kind of evil? It's a spiritual understanding, that's all. I think, that's all I got on that. It's mind-numbing. It's because they're not taught by the Spirit. They don't ask for the understanding. You could read something 1,000 times. These Trinitarians, and they will never come to knowledge of understanding until they put their pride away and their religion, throw their hands up and say, teach me. They don't do that. They already know everything, just like Messiah said they would say. I didn't come to heal the righteous. I came for sinners. That's mocking them. It's a righteous mockery of fake believers. He didn't come to heal the righteous. He's not even talking about, nobody is righteous of their own works. None of our works are any good. It's his works working in us. That's the faith. And it will want to do what's right. Then it's counted for righteousness, the faith and works, because it's his, not your own. So that's what these people are. They're their own works. They're prideful and self-righteous still. They're like spiritual baby. They just don't know. They don't understand. So that's how you do it. That's how the Father is pierced, when they pierced him, the Messiah. And this is still true today. If you pierce spiritually, if you pierce someone, another believer, you pierce him. So it's pretty serious. That's why it says those who call an actual true brother a fool, you're in danger of that judgment, that Gehenna, that spiritual fiery judgment. Now, not like in the future sometime, like even now, you're in danger of that judgment, spiritual judgment. You're going to be judged for that. You can't do whatever you want and not get away with it spiritually. But also in the future, if you continue to live like that, go into judgment. Pretty simple, pure, logical, clean, true. That Messiah is not the Father. There's no Trinity. 3 is a big number in scriptures. No one's saying it's not. That's not they don't understand what 1 means. That's all. They don't understand what 1 means. It's spiritual. You know, they're thinking literally and carnally. They're thinking 3 bottles of water. This is the Trinity, and each one is God, and each one is co-eternal and co-this, co-that, co-pilot, forever and ever. You know, Messiah is the Father, and now they're one. You know, it doesn't work. It's foolishness, that teaching, that doctrine. The Spirit is the Father's Spirit. It's not like some other separate being that's apart from the Father. And as soon as you name something up, the Comforter that's going to come, is that the 4th person of the Trinity, of which we can't call Trinity anymore if there's 4? The Comforter is the Spirit. The Spirit is the Father. He gives his Spirit, you know, and to have the Father's Spirit is to have the Messiah's Spirit, because they're one. It's the one same Spirit. It's not different. It's not something separate or cut off, or it's all on its own doing its own thing, you know. And it's a being, God the Holy Spirit, you know. Never going to find that phrase in Scripture because it's not true. Never going to find God the Son, Elohim the Son, because it's not true. If it was an actual truth, it would say that many times, but no, it says Son of Elohim. And they act like no one else ever becomes a son. He's just the Messiah. Just the Messiah, you know. True believers are sons of Elohim. They are also sons. The same way Messiah was. Same way. How could this be? How could you also be called a son? But, you know, their definition of son for the Messiah is like, I don't know what it is, because the Messiah is the Father, but then he became a son somehow through some physical incarnation. But now we got other people called sons that have nothing to do with any physical incarnation. How is that? How is that happening? How is that possible? It's because it's not true. It's spiritual. Messiah, being a son, is spiritual, and everyone after him is spiritual. Meaning it has nothing to do with physical, literal, material stuff going on. Has nothing to do with 3 physical things becoming one physical thing, you know. But only the Spirit could give you these understandings and truth, you know. I could read a certain verse and it makes sense. I understand it, and I could tell someone this is what it means. They read it and they got something else going on. Well, one of us are a liar. One of us are liars, and since Satan deceives the whole world, it's the Trinitarians who are liars, because the majority is virtually almost always lying or wrong about truth, you know. I've said it before, if it's a majority teaching in the world, you better be questioning it, because it's very unlikely that it's the truth. Very unlikely. And I mean, even some of the minor things, they butcher too, you know. Some of the most minor, simple things. And one proof for that is not even knowing when a day starts. I don't know how many hundreds of verses prove that in Scripture, but there's a lot. And it's very simple, very logical, and it makes spiritual sense that, you know, a day is in the light, not at night. Calling day dark and dark day, you know. The whole world's confused about that. How much more grander truths, like who the Father is and Messiah, you know, and they just throw it up to some Trinity. Pagan deity that existed for thousands of years before Messiah was even born. Babylon, Egypt, probably even right back in the beginning, Mesopotamia, you know, soon after humanity started getting corrupt, a few hundred years later. Suspected spam caller. I'm going to end it here. Peace. Take care. Seek truth only.